All right, so we've talked a little bit about invasive species. We're just finishing up this lecture. Like I said, sometimes invasive species were introduced intentionally to try and make the environment more beautiful, or perhaps try to combat some of the pests that we're having, but other times they were unintentionally introduced. And this is what happens most often, like the fire ant that bites you when you walk outside in the grass here. Yep, that was accidentally introduced. It is not actually native here. It's one of our invasive species. Same with like the zebra mussels. Those are a big deal or a big issue up in the Great Lakes, like Lake Erie and Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. Those actually did not come from right here. And like I said, one of the issues with invasive species is they don't have any natural predators, meaning that for the most part, these are pretty unchecked species, meaning that nothing really eats them, so they run amok pretty much. Here's our example though, that fire ant that I told you about, that if you walk outside and get bit by something in an ant mind, it's generally this species right here. It was accidentally introduced in Mobile, Alabama in 1932, and like I said, it's been running amok ever since. You can see the green on this graph right here was where it was originally, that was its range or where it lived, but then it came over here, most probably from ships, again to Alabama, and has spread over much of the southern United States. It has no natural predators, meaning that nothing eats it, nothing is really there to kill it except maybe us with some ant killers. That's why we have so many of them here. The best way to prevent invasive species is to reduce threats. The best way to reduce threats from invasive species is prevention, so being mindful of what you're spreading from one place to another. Don't pick up a wild plant and bring it somewhere else to your house because you just think it's pretty. Don't dump the contents of an aquarium into waterways, wetlands, or storm drains. For example, we have, what are those fish? No, snakes. Pythons are pets sometimes. And when people don't want them anymore, or some of their pets, like the exotic pets, they'll just throw them where they think they'll thrive. And that's how a lot of our invasive species become an issue, because they do survive there and then they repopulate, or they can make hybrids with native species, and then we have an invasive species problem. So prevention and knowing that you shouldn't take wildlife from one place to another, nor should you just put your wildlife back into the wild. It doesn't work that way. Big thing with camping is you need to find wood near your campsite instead of bringing firewood from somewhere else to have a fire. That helps prevent the spread of insects. Population growth is another threat to biodiversity, our population growth specifically. In the year 1800, there were fewer than 1 billion people of Earth. Today, there are well over 7 billion. Our increasing human population has led to threats, increasing threats to biodiversity. Humans, as you know, are not very environmentally conscious as a whole. Not only that, we take up a lot of space. We have a big impact. And because of that, we're really negatively affecting the ecosystems around us and biodiversity. Like I said, many of the extinct species that we see today, or that we know of today, have become extinct because humans have one way or another killed them all, whether that be physically they were hunting them, or perhaps they took their environment, they changed the climate, what have you, and projections are only getting worse. With more people comes more pollution, also more space is needed for those people, and more food. So population growth is really threatening our biodiversity, or the high variety of life that we see in many areas. Pollution is also one of our issues. We learn this a lot with the hydrosphere. We often throw pollutants out into the environment, not thinking about the effects that they'll have on the animals and plants in that environment, even when it's not a toxic substance. Remember, we talked about thermal pollution or hot water pollution. Sometimes even that can harm the native species. Too much pollution, the ecosystem can't bounce back from it. So then again, we have the death of an ecosystem, or perhaps species in that ecosystem. It's important to remember that substances that are natural can become a pollutant. Like I said, that hot water can also you don't think of hot water as being a pollutant, but it is if it's changing the water temperature so much that your native species can't live there anymore. And again, when we studied the hydrosphere, we learned about eutrophication, or when we put too much nitrogen and phosphorus into a water zone, which can lead to deadly algae blooms and then dead zones. Remember, we learned because the algae dies, bacteria comes to break down that algae, and then all the oxygen in the system is used up, so there's no more oxygen for our fish or plants to live or breathe, and then they end up dying, and we have the death of a natural ecosystem. That's not good. And then overexploitation, this is when we hunt things to an extreme. Like I said, hunting things necessarily is not an issue. That's why if any of you are hunters from around here, you know you have a certain number of birds, or like you can only hunt so many doe and you can only hunt so many bucks. That's because the population needs to be able to bounce back from whatever you've taken. It needs to be able to reproduce more of its offspring so that you can hunt another season. That's why you do have limits. Some species are more protected than others, like the elephants. You cannot kill an elephant. It's not allowed. You can't kill a whale. Also not allowed, because they are so endangered. Also, we kill a lot of our predators to make it safer for us, like what you see here in this picture, although this looks like they were killing them more for trophies. But we kill them to make it safer for us, but we don't realize when we kill all the predators, we're actually going to cause some issues with the ecosystem. In a little bit, when we talk about Trophic Cascade, we're going to learn about what happened when we killed all the wolves in Yellowstone. The wolves changed the rivers, is what you'll learn. And it's amazing and a huge story and a wonderful example of Trophic Cascade. But again, we'll talk about that after spring break. Not only are we killing them to make it safer for us, they are sometimes used for decorative purposes. Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're illegal. Like it's illegal to sell ivory now, or the ivory is the tusk of a elephant and something else, but you can't sell that. You can't sell rhino horns. Those are illegal. That's something you would find on the black market, and I hope you all never do, because it has led to almost the extinction of our natural elephants. And then we have some endangered species. Sorry, my mother called me. I told her I'd call her back because learning about endangered species is of vital importance right now. So we have some endangered species in North Carolina, and maybe you would see them out in the wild. If you do see them, try to take a picture, because I would love to see what you're seeing out in the wild. Flying squirrels are endangered. We can find them in North Carolina, but when I say endangered species, that means they're on our radar, but they have an exclamation point by them. The scientists have studied their population. They know it's declining. We know we need to take action soon to be able to protect these species. The flying squirrel is one of them. The red wolf is also one of them. The Atlantic sturgeon is one of them. Our pitcher plants are also, as well as many of our carnivorous plants, are endangered. The red cockadated woodpecker, as well as our green sea turtle, which, by the way, is green because it eats a bunch of kelp, and that actually gives it its green color. We learned that the other day. But those are some of our endangered species. Again, we've looked at this graph before in a little bit of a different way. So we are identifying here 6 total hotspots. The other graph we looked at showed North Carolina as a biological hotspot, which it is. This one is a little bit more dated. But biodiversity hotspots in relation to the largest concentration of rare and potentially endangered species in the U.S. That means that we've identified biological hotspots with that graph before, but here we're also looking at how many endangered species live in that area as well. So if you look, Hawaii has our biggest, San Francisco Bay Area, the second largest. Third largest is the Southern Appalachian Mountains. 4 is Death Valley. 5, Southern California. And 6, the Florida Panhandle right there. What this means and what this graph is telling us is that in those areas particularly, we've got a lot of endangered species and a lot of variety of life. That means we need to be really careful and really conscious of what we're building and doing there, because it's going to have a large effect on our species that are already in danger. Efforts to help. So we have done a lot to try and help. We've realized that this is a problem. We are killing species, whether that be physically killing again or doing things that are killing the species. So we're trying to prevent that. or to try to make it better, right? So we've tried to enact some laws. We've made the Endangered Species Act, which covers a lot of the species. It protects the species. It helps to make sure that you can't build on the environment that they live on. It helps to protect them against hunting, what have you. It protects them. We've created sanctuaries. Like if you've noticed, Elizabethtown is called a bird sanctuary. That means that it is a safe place for some of these organisms. Not only that, we have created like the sea turtle hospital where we can rehabilitate some of that wildlife that is endangered. There's also a lot of bird habitat, not habitats, but they're like hospitals, but they help breed them and then release them into the wild to try and help that native population or that natural population rebound. We promote habitats, so we protect areas that we know they live in. We also, not only we can reclaim land, so maybe a piece of land goes up for sale and the government or what have you, an agency will buy it and then put habitats specifically for these organisms on there. Advocacy is a big one. Anytime we talk about advocacy, that means that people are speaking out and promoting the efforts to help these endangered species. And not only that, we make purchases consciously to help these endangered species, whether that be buying a habitat for these species or thinking yourself as a consumer in ways that'll help save these organisms. One example, how much plastic are you using? Plastic is one of the big killers for many of our seabirds and sea animals. How much are you using? What can you cut down on in your own life so that you're having less of an impact? Here's promoting habitats. So we can put up bird boxes. We often do. There's a lot of citizen science projects that help with this. For the holes are too small for the non-native competitors, so that means that we're building birdhouses specifically that target our native bird population. This can help with areas where trees have been cut down and help reestablish those natural populations. And that's it. So here are some review questions. Hopefully you're able to answer them. Sorry this lecture was a little bit long, but I love talking about biodiversity and invasive species. There will be more to come after spring break. Have a great day, guys.